Over the last 7 years, I have gotten an up-close and personal awakening about the government, the U.S. Corps of Engineers. The politicians, the Corps of Engineers, the government has not done enough for me, my family, and my neighbors, and everyone that was affected by this hurricane. I think what makes me the angriest about this entire situation is that I never had a choice in it. After I sat down for a while and found out the things that they knew for 40 years, the documents, the internal memos, people were literally saying, hey, if this certain storm hits this certain way, this is going to happen. And no one told me that when I picked out my lot on Despo Drive in Chalmette, and no one told me that when I built my dream house, and no one told me that when I had my children and moved them in there and put them and the rest of my family in harm's way. I just think it's important for everyone to know, and not just the Katrina litigation, but anybody across the country who deals with natural disasters and anything. Some things are unpreventable, and some things you or I, we have no control over. But this situation, I hope that everyone realizes, could have been controlled to some extent, and what happened didn't necessarily need to happen to the amount it did. And so when people ask me, do you think this is going to do any good, or do you really think the government is responsible? You know, I say yes. They are responsible.
Well over 2 years ago, a federal judge in New Orleans awarded 6 victims of Hurricane Katrina almost $750,000, ruling that the Army Corps of Engineers helped cause the flooding of their homes and businesses by carelessly maintaining a shipping channel to the Gulf of Mexico. This landmark decision was the first to break through the legal immunity that had shielded the Corps from liability for flood damage in the deadly storm's aftermath. On March 2nd, 2012, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed this landmark decision. Today, the Insider Exclusive goes behind the headlines in Katrina Justice, Tanya Smith's story, to meet and examine how Joe Bruno, managing partner of Bruno & Bruno, and some of his legal team, John Andre and Scott Joannan, helped get Tanya justice. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from New Orleans. It is my great pleasure to introduce Joe Bruno and Scott Joannan to the show. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
For anybody who doesn't know what happened with Hurricane Katrina and the subsequent litigation, would you bring us up to date from 2005, 2007, 2009?
Well, we tried the case in 2009. This is litigation that we had filed against the Corps of Engineers because we felt like we had to do something about the widespread knowledge that the Corps was negligent in causing the flooding of this community.
Yeah.
So we filed the lawsuit, and we thought we had a way around the immunity. We were successful. We got it.
By the way, I want to dwell on that little issue of immunity, because when the U.S. government builds something under the Flood Act of 1928, they gave immunity to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for any kind of canals that they built because they didn't want to be sued.
Right. Well, the deal was, listen.
And that's a powerful hurdle to get over.
Yeah, and it had some logic to it. We're going to provide you with flood protection. Don't sue us if we mess it up. So what was unique here, though, was that it wasn't the flood control project that was the source of the flooding. Mm-hmm. It was a channel that the Corps had built to provide a way to get into the port from the Gulf without going down the river. And it's interesting because they did that because in World War II there was a fear that the Germans would come in and blow up the mouth of the river. So this was the logic and the basis. But the real reason they did it was because the maritime industry wanted a shorter way to the port of New Orleans.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting that you bring up this, a lot of people misunderstand that even though Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, the flooding that ensued would not have been as extensive.
No question.
Had the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers done their job, right?
Correct.
The fact of the matter is that the walls, had they done what they were supposed to do, would have been very little flooding, very little at all.
In 2009, you were in front of Judge Duvall, a federal court judge, and you got a positive verdict on your 6 clients' behalf, correct?
Exactly.
Tell our audience a little bit about what that was about.
Well, Scott, why don't you tell them about the, first talk about the levy side of it.
Well, the levy side was the judge with this massive litigation divided the city in essence in half, with the industrial canal being the divided line. Everything to the west of that, which is the city proper, the French Quarter, all those areas, that was found to be immune because of this Flood Control Act that you spoke of, and that's why that was not ever brought to trial. It did go to appeal. The eastern side was the Mr. Go litigation, and that's where you have New Orleans East is one polder, and a polder is a bowl. In fact, the only place in the United States where there are polders is in New Orleans and up in the Sacramento Delta. Most polders are in the Netherlands, which is interesting because that's where we had to go get the experts to testify in this case. So you have New Orleans East, the Lower Ninth Ward, and St. Bernard Parish. And so the trial in April was for that side of the
Mr. Go litigation.
Right.
Our logic was, well, okay, well, we can't sue the Corps for the levies, and we seized on some language that we had found in their executive summary of what they said was the cause of the flooding. In that executive summary, they said the levees performed as designed. So we thought, that's interesting, because the truth of it is, we don't want to attack the levees. We like that. We want to say that they're not defective. And indeed, we got the court to stipulate with us that the levees were not defective, which allowed us then to attack the navigation project, not a flood control project, and find a way around. So it was their own arrogance. Because if the Corps had gone into that courtroom and said...
They were probably very confused about you agreeing with them, right?
Yeah, very confused. But if the Corps had gone into the courtroom and said, Your Honor, we screwed up, the levees broke, they're defective, we're a bunch of idiots.
You wouldn't have gone after the channel. You couldn't have gone after that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, remarkable, and as I said, we decided to play on that arrogance.
Yeah.
We found that sentence which said, we didn't do anything wrong, the levees performed as designed. We thought, aha, we got you now. And we got them, and the Fifth Circuit, as of yesterday, agrees.
Yeah. Now, the Fifth Circuit had some really terse language in it, didn't it?
About
what the government's position. What is that language?
They did that. Judge Duvall, of course, ruled that with very terse language in the levy district, levy case, talking about how the Corps of Engineers had operated with just such impunity and disregard for the citizens of New Orleans. Yeah. The same in the New Orleans East and Mr. Go litigations as well. And the Fifth Circuit picked up on that and sees clearly that the Corps of Engineers was not looking out for the best interests of the citizens, and that negligence and that arrogance led to what became the devastating engineering disaster that we suffered in 2005.
Right. And the Fifth Circuit is really traditionally a very conservative circuit.
Extremely conservative. In fact, the 3 justices that ruled on this case, one appointed by Reagan, one appointed by George Bush Sr., and the third appointed by George Bush Jr. So, we thought, wow, these are conservative folks, but you know what? They were fair.
Now, there are a lot of people watching this show, and they may be claimants in these cases. What can you say to them now about where does this go from here?
Well, first of all, understand, this is our government. Our government has said, listen, we are not going to pay a dime until you put a gun to our head, meaning we have to exhaust all the appeals. There's got to be a judgment. We hope, of course, that cooler heads and saner heads prevail. If not at the Justice Department, then at the Congress, and that they pay these claims. Right. But the procedure is that, first of all, we face an appeal to the Supreme Court, which we don't think will be likely. We don't think that the Supreme Court will take this case. Now,
And the reason they wouldn't take it is because it's a political hot potato.
And I think that
And the law is on your side.
The law is on our side. I mean, this is not anything major precedential value. I mean, the Fifth Circuit stayed within prior precedent.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It's logical. It's not like it's going to be anything terribly controversial.
Now, what is the time frame of having the Supreme Court hear this? Within the year?
They will have an opportunity to take a writ. Supreme Court's a little bit unusual. You don't have an automatic right of appeal.
Right.
You have to say, okay, court, will you listen to my appeal? If they say no, if they deny it, we get a result in 6 months.
Yes.
If they say yes, it'll take probably a year.
Okay. And at that stage of the game, is there any way that the government can come back and say, well, we want a second bite at the apple?
Well, their second bite's going to be this, and they've already told us this.
Yeah.
You think you won? Ha ha. We're going to make you try every one of these things one at a time.
How can they do that?
Well, they can try to do it. I don't envision that the court's going to be terribly enthusiastic about that, because it's a monumental waste of the court's time, a monumental waste of the public fisc, because guess what? You're paying for these experts and you're paying for these lawyers. I think the court's going to believe us when we say they are collaterally stopped. In other words, there's a procedure that says you can't assert a defense that has been ruled on.
Yeah, res
You've
judicata.
lost. Yeah. So anyway, it's our hope that they'll apply the doctrine of collateral estoppel, and if they do, then we'll be able to get a judgment for a class of folks within this polder, as Scott puts it.
No, this judgment is going to be monumental, isn't it? It's a lot of money. How many people does this affect?
Well, it's difficult to assess. We know that there are 400,000 people who filed a Form 95, but those are folks from this polder, New Orleans East, all over the place. We did an evaluation, and we think that it's probably worth, for just the St. Bernard Lower 9 polder, about $10 billion to $20 billion.
Right. Today we have with us one of the people that this will affect. One of the victorious claimants, if you will, both at the trial level and as well as the appellate level, Tanya Smith and her attorney, John Andre. And we're going to bring them on right now to get their viewpoint of this. Let's do that.
Okay.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Tanya Smith and her attorney, John Andre. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello.
You were, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yesterday, the appeals court upheld your verdict, along with 5 other people, and that must make you feel good, right?
I'm very excited to hear it.
From your personal point of view as a non-lawyer, 2005, 7 years later, how have you looked at this whole experience?
It's been quite a whirlwind.
Yeah.
The beginning was, I really didn't understand a whole lot of the litigation and how the case was coming together, although John did his best to keep us informed. Probably somewhere right before the original trial, when we really sat down and saw the evidence, saw the documents. It's when the pieces started coming together of what had actually happened. And in the beginning, I didn't even think about cause or anything. I was just more focused on getting my life back together. You know, I have 2 little kids and I had elderly parents, and I was just more worried about where I was going to sleep that night.
Yeah, now as you're talking, we're showing pictures of your house as it got destroyed, and it's been rebuilt, correct?
Yes, it's rebuilt.
And what it looks like today. How long a time period was that from August of 2005 to when it was rebuilt?
Years. It was, I finished construction near November of 2007, and unfortunately then I had a fire. But
fire on top of the hurricane.
On top of the hurricane.
Okay.
But that wasn't because of construction. It took so many months to even decide whether we could even move back. You know, that was all with the EPA, and you know, so we were kept out of the parish for many months before. So it just kind of sat there.
Which parish was that?
St. Bernard Parish.
Okay. And you're now living back there, right?
Yes, I live in my house. It's rebuilt again.
Where were you living in the interim period of time?
At first, we stayed with relatives. Then I had acquired a house to rent. So we rented a little small, I guess you call it a condo, in Jefferson Parish. And we lived there for about 2 years. So simultaneously paid a house note on a house that was in shambles, and then paid rent on an apartment.
You are in the medical field, healthcare, right?
Correct.
You're a nurse. anesthetist?
I am. I'm a nurse anesthetist.
So you must have been pretty busy too.
Well, actually, at the time of the storm, I was in anesthesia school. So the storm actually hit 3 weeks after I started the program. So yeah, I a lot of traveling, a lot of juggling. It was.
Yeah. Now, John, this is just one of your clients. You have some others that have equally been positively affected, and hundreds of thousands of other people too, right?
Yes.
Were you a little bit surprised with the appellate court decision?
I was in awe when it first came out. I mean, it was
there is justice then, right?
There is justice.
Yeah.
I mean, it shows that the court system actually works and that there is such a thing as justice.
Yeah.
And now it's important that we take the next step and that we get the people actually compensated and that they fix the problem with the Corps and that they fix the problem in St. Bernard.
Yeah, now, since 2009, let's say, has the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers done anything to improve the channel, or what have they done?
Well, they've closed off the channel and then they built, there's a funnel, the way the channel is designed, where at the confluence of the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway and the Mistrigo, and they built a big surge barrier there that they call in St. Bernard the Great Wall of St. Bernard.
Have they built it to the satisfaction of all engineers?
Yeah, yes.
They have?
Yes, so far, but most of those are built by the lowest bidder because the Corps is actually a construction management firm. So we'll see once it gets battle tested if it actually works in the face of a hurricane.
Your faith in the U.S. government's been tested, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, what would you say to our audience, you know, because here it's clear that it's their screw up, and yet they're fighting tooth and nail not to own up to it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's our government, isn't it?
It is. It is.
How does that make you feel?
I always grew up like everyone else, you know, government, you're for the people, by the people, and the fact that they have tried so vehemently to overturn this decision has really left a bad taste in my mouth for it. But we'll see. You know, you never know. They may just go ahead and let this court appeals decision go. They probably won't. But
what do you think of John's law firm and his efforts, and all of the lawyers that have been involved with this?
There was a lot of lawyers, but I work primarily with John. And they're great. They're great. He. Not just an attorney. I mean, he's really become a good friend of ours. He was a good friend of my mom and dad's also. So everybody in his office, everybody, you know, Joe's office, and all the other attorneys, they were really good to us and helped us to understand, you know, that it wasn't just, oh, we want this big sensational story. They helped us understand this is what happened, and it happened because of this. Right. And it wasn't your fault.
And someone has to pay for it when it's their fault, right?
And I can say that I've been involved in class action cases with lawyers before. This was way more than just lawyers doing a case. Everybody did their role and did it all very well. You know, Joe did very well, others did very well, and everybody kind of had their place on the team. It was very, to me, felt the same as like when the Saints went to the Super Bowl, that it was more about a city than it was a case. And it was more about a principle of where we lived and what was going on to us, as opposed to just doing a case. And I think all of the members of the team, and the plaintiffs included, have that kind of belief that this is not just a legal case. This is something where we need to stand up to change the way the government does business, because this shouldn't happen in an American city.
Yes, and I'm so glad that you guys fought so hard today, because you spent a lot of money on this. But you were doing it in the interest of justice, and I want to thank both of you for taking the time to be on our show today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How do you see this decision at the Fifth Circuit now affecting the way the government, especially the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, does business?
Well, we can only hope. That, you know, I can't get inside their heads. I know that with all due respect to them, they are an arrogant lot. They are an extremely arrogant lot. They've done business this way for 50 years. They don't like to be told what to do. They don't even like the Congress to tell them what to do. They spend money when, where, and how they choose to. One would hope that at the very least they would understand that they are responsible for the deleterious effects of the projects that they complete. Because you know what happened here is, whether you're concerned about flood control or not flood control, they let that channel go from 600 feet in width to 3,000 feet in width without regard to the consequence. Didn't care. I asked the question in deposition. Well, if you had a little shack and you were using it to fish, and you woke up one morning and you saw that the channel bank was getting closer and closer and closer until one day it was right outside your door, what would you tell that person to do? The response? Well, they should call their congressman.
Are you serious?
I'm absolutely serious. And so one would hope that maybe they get it. They, as a U.S. citizen, you shouldn't be required to call your congressman.
Yeah.
You can call the court and say, you know, you guys have messed up here. Fix it.
Yeah. You know, this comes to what you have accomplished here, and hopefully the U.S. Supreme Court either affirms it or doesn't hear the case and it's affirmed. What it really comes down to, there really is justice in America if you fight hard enough for it. The sad thing is that second section, which you have to fight hard enough for it. Well, you don't have people who are employees of us, aren't they?
Right.
U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they're paid by U.S. taxpayer, right? They are supposed to listen to the people that they're supposed to be doing benefit.
Absolutely.
And they don't.
It's a very tough issue because, you know, let's face it, in America we're taught this thing called capitalism, which is go out there and do stuff and make some money.
Yeah.
And what you don't realize is there's a whole lot of ways to make a whole lot of money. And whether you realize it or recognize it or not, corporate interests in this country have become so powerful.
Yeah.
A little guy doesn't really mean squat to them. They are a tool for them to make money.
Exactly.
They are a widget. And so, you know, what's beautiful about the business that we're in is that the market allows us to make money, helping those people and keeping big corporations at bay and bringing some balance to the system. Because at the end of the day, it's really nothing more than about balance.
Yes. Well, congratulations to both of you and to all of the lawyers and the law firms that are involved. And I want to thank you very much for taking the time to be on the show.
Thank you, and thanks to all the guys that joined us in this fight.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.